New York City, Manhattan, Sterling Industries Tower in the financial district. Sarah Mitchell, janitor and part-time mechanic, was cleaning the lobby when she saw James Sterling, CEO of the $10 billion tech empire, heading toward his Bentley Bentayga worth $400,000. Something about the movement under the vehicle paralyzed her. She dropped everything and ran screaming not to get in that car. James looked at her with contempt. The same man who had humiliated her that morning for parking her beat-up Honda Civic in the executive area for 5 minutes. But when Sarah literally threw herself under the car, extracting a device connected to the brake system, his blood froze. The assassination attempt that should have killed him had been thwarted by a janitor who made $2,000 a month. But the most shocking truth was yet to emerge. Sarah wasn't just a janitor. She was the former lead engineer at Tesla who had lost everything to save lives. And James was the man who had unknowingly caused her downfall 5 years earlier. The Sterling Industries Tower dominated the New York skyline like a monument to American capitalism, its glass and steel facade reflecting the ambitions and failures of Wall Street. It was 7:45 on a cold October morning when Sarah Mitchell, 38 years of tired muscles and shattered dreams, finished her night shift. Her hands, which once designed complex algorithms and created revolutionary safety systems for autonomous vehicles, now gripped the handle of an industrial mop. The blue work uniform concealed a body that had known better days when she ran through Tesla's gigafactory in Nevada, when her name appeared in tech magazines as one of the brightest minds in automotive engineering. 5 years had passed since that cursed day in Fremont, 5 years during which Sarah Mitchell, the engineer who had revolutionized electric vehicle safety systems, had become a ghost, cleaning the offices of the powerful while they slept. The metamorphosis had been as swift as it was painful, from the pinnacle of Silicon Valley to the bottom of the social ladder, a fall that had pulverized not only her career, but also her family, her identity, her will to live. The memories haunted her in the pre-dawn silence of the tower. The autopilot system she'd designed, 3 years of her life poured into code that was supposed to save thousands of lives. The test run that went catastrophically wrong when a batch of faulty processors caused a complete system failure. The test driver, Marcus Thompson, a 25-year-old father of 2, paralyzed from the chest down. The investigation had cleared her of legal responsibility. The processors were from a third-party supplier, but she couldn't clear her conscience. Sterling Industries had supplied those processors, a subsidiary she'd never heard of until the lawyers started pointing fingers. They'd paid the settlement, sued their Chinese supplier, moved on. Business as usual. She'd resigned the same day, unable to look at another line of code without seeing Marcus in his wheelchair. James Sterling crossed the lobby with his characteristic alpha predator stride. 42 years of concentrated power in 6 feet 2 inches of ruthless determination, wrapped in a Tom Ford suit that cost more than Sarah made in 4 months. His Italian leather shoes struck the marble floor with metronomic precision, each step a declaration of territorial dominance. Sarah knew him well, though he'd never bothered to look her in the eye. 7 years at the helm of Sterling Industries had transformed him from a privileged heir into a corporate shark, capable of firing 500 people via email while sipping champagne in his private jet. The Wall Street Journal called him the tech tyrant. Employees whispered less flattering epithets in the break rooms. That very morning, they'd crossed paths in the underground garage. Sarah had parked her dying Honda Civic in the spot reserved for the chairman of the board, just long enough to unload cleaning supplies. 5 minutes, maybe less. James had arrived at that exact moment, and his fury had been volcanic. He'd humiliated her in front of the security guards, the arriving executives, even the coffee cart kid bringing breakfast. Words like blades cutting into her already compromised dignity, threats of immediate termination, pure contempt for this insect who had dared profane the sacred space of power. Sarah had bowed her head, mumbling apologies, moving her car while something inside her died a little more. She was used to humiliation now, bearing the invisible scars of 1,000 small daily deaths. But she needed this job. Lily, her 11-year-old daughter, lived with her in a studio apartment in Queens, and the rent was the only thing keeping them from the streets. Now, as she gathered her equipment to leave, her gaze fell on the black Bentley Bentayga, parked in the VIP area outside. A masterpiece of British engineering worth $400,000, with hand-stitched leather interior and carbon fiber accents. The driver was already warming the engine, daily routine to take James to his 8:15 meeting with the Japanese executives from Tokyo Dynamics. It was an anomalous light reflection that caught Sarah's attention. A metallic glint under the vehicle, where there should be nothing but the gray asphalt of the parking lot. Years at Tesla, where a misplaced bolt could mean death at high speed in autopilot mode, had trained her eyes to catch the anomaly, the imperfection in the pattern. She approached, pretending to pick up litter. She bent down, and what she saw paralyzed her. A sophisticated device, no bigger than a cigarette pack, connected with surgical precision to the Bentley's ABS system. She immediately recognized the C4 plastic explosive, enough to blow up the car. But it was the trigger mechanism that was genius, programmed to activate after exactly 2 miles, when the car would be at full speed on the FDR drive. Sarah's brain processed the information in nanoseconds. Not a crude attack, but a professional assassination disguised as an accident. The brakes would lock completely at lethal speed. The car would go haywire, the crash inevitable. No trace, no suspicion, just another tragic traffic accident in New York's brutal morning rush. James was already halfway to the car, typing furiously on his phone, probably firing someone or closing a $1 million deal. The driver already had the door open, the engine purring softly. 30 seconds, and he'd be in. 30 seconds, and he'd be doomed. Sarah didn't think. Her body moved before her mind could process the consequences. She dropped the bucket and rags, the metallic clatter echoing in the cold morning air. She ran like she hadn't run since high school in Detroit, when she still believed speed could take her away from the poverty of the projects. Her legs protested, her lungs burned, but she reached James in time. The scream that came from her throat wasn't human. It was primal, the desperate alarm of someone who sees death face to face. James turned with an expression mixing amazement, disgust, and rage. The janitor, who had already irritated him that morning, now dared to touch him, grabbing his arm, preventing him from getting in. Security moved immediately. 2 bodyguards, former Navy SEALs, rushed toward Sarah, but she was already sliding under the Bentley with the residual agility of someone who had spent years under prototype vehicles. Her expert hands located the device, studied the connections, professional work, military or intelligence services. The digital timer showed 0.247 to the secondary detonator, a backup in case the primary system failed. With precise movements that contradicted her years as a janitor, Sarah first disabled the secondary timer, then carefully disconnected the main detonator from the C4. Only when she had the completely inert device in her hands did she emerge from under the car. Sweat poured down her forehead, despite the 40-degree temperature. James stared at her, paralyzed, his brain struggling to process the transition from rage to shock to terror. The device in Sarah's hands spoke for itself. The bodyguards were pale, realizing how close they'd come to total failure. The driver had already called the police. Sirens approaching broke the surreal silence of the moment. The NYPD interrogation room in one police plaza had seen everything over the years. Terrorists, mobsters, international spies. But that morning it hosted an unusual scene. A janitor in work clothes sitting with the calm of a Zen master while New York's most experienced detectives tried to figure out who she really was. Detective Chief Morrison, 30 years on the force, and a face marked by too many sleepless nights, studied Sarah with the intensity of an entomologist examining a rare species. The janitor's hands told a different story than her uniform. Old burns from high temperatures, calluses in specific spots, suggesting prolonged use of precision instruments, a scar on her left palm, typical of someone who works with carbon fiber. James Sterling sat across the table, still in controlled shock. For the first time in years, the mask of the invincible CEO showed cracks. He observed Sarah with new eyes, noticing details his arrogance had prevented him from seeing before. The upright posture despite the humble uniform, the way her fingers drummed on the table following a complex mathematical pattern, eyes that betrayed superior intelligence hidden under layers of resignation. Morrison opened a thick folder, beginning to read in a monotone voice that betrayed repressed excitement. Sarah Mitchell, born in Detroit's Cass Corridor, working-class family, father an auto assembly worker laid off when the plants closed, mother a nurse working double shifts. Full scholarships for exceptional merit. Graduated summa cum laude from MIT in aerospace engineering. Recruited by Tesla straight from graduation. 43 patents registered. Lead safety systems architect for 5 years. Innovator of the Year according to TechCrunch for 3 consecutive years. Then the void. From March 15, 2019, nothing. As if Sarah Mitchell had evaporated, leaving only an empty shell cleaning offices in Manhattan's most prestigious tower. Morrison placed a photo on the table. The Fremont facility, Marcus Thompson being extracted from the crashed Model S prototype, spine shattered. Career as a test driver ended in 3 seconds of terror during an autopilot malfunction. Sarah looked at the photo without apparent emotion, but James noticed the microscopic tremor in her jaw, the way her hands clenched into fists, then forcibly relaxed. She began to recount in a flat voice, devoid of inflection, like someone reciting a memorized sentence. The active safety system she'd designed was supposed to revolutionize autonomous driving. Predictive sensors capable of anticipating collisions and activating automatic countermeasures milliseconds before impact. 3 years of development, endless testing, perfect simulations. Then, on that cursed California morning, catastrophic failure. The system had misinterpreted data, activating emergency braking at 70 miles per hour on the highway. Marcus never had a chance. The NHTSA investigation had completely exonerated her. The problem was in a batch of defective microprocessors supplied by a subcontractor. Sarah remembered the name on the invoice perfectly. Sterling Industries, Advanced Components Division. A batch of chips with a manufacturing defect that only manifested under extreme conditions of heat and vibration. The perfect storm that occurred that exact day. James felt his blood freeze. He vaguely remembered the incident, handled by legal as a normal insurance dispute. $70 million in settlement. Lawsuit against the Chinese silicon wafer supplier. Case closed. He'd never thought about the lives destroyed behind those numbers on a spreadsheet. Sarah continued the story of her descent into hell. Immediate resignation despite Tesla's pleas to stay. The obsessive conviction that she should have personally tested every component. Alcohol as anesthetic for guilt. David, her husband, who after 6 months of trying to save her, had taken Lily and left. The divorce that left her with the legal minimum. Selling the house, the car, everything.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
A year of emotional vagrancy, sleeping in shelters, surviving on odd jobs. Then she'd seen the ad for a night janitor at Sterling Industries. The irony was too perfect, cleaning the offices of the company that had inadvertently contributed to her ruin. She'd applied with minimal documents, omitting her glorious past. The overworked HR manager hadn't dug deeper. For 3 years, she'd cleaned in silence, watching James come and go, hating and admiring him in equal measure. hating him for what he represented, soulless capitalism that ground up human lives, admiring him for his determination, the ability to survive in a world of sharks by being the apex predator himself. Morrison interrupted the narrative, showing new photos. The device dismantled, analyzed by the bomb squad. Professional work, military components, partial DNA traces that matched no database. But there was a disturbing detail. The device was programmed with Sterling Industries' internal access codes. Someone inside the company wanted James dead. The CEO processed the information with the speed of someone used to quick decisions under pressure. The list of enemies was long. Envious competitors, disgruntled shareholders, fired former employees. But who had access to Level 5 security codes? Only 3 people besides him. Michael Sterling, his brother and CFO, Richard Vaughn, vice president and his father's right hand, Jennifer Chen, the IT director who managed all systems. Sarah observed James as he processed the possibilities and for the first time saw beyond the ice mask. There was genuine fear in his eyes, the realization that someone very close wanted him dead. But there was something else. Loneliness. The loneliness of someone at the top of the pyramid who can't trust anyone. The interrogation was interrupted by the precipitous arrival of Michael Sterling. 35 years old, handsome in the artificial way of someone who spends too much on gyms and cosmetic surgery, he burst in demanding to see his brother. The embrace seemed genuine, the tears authentic. But Sarah, trained to catch anomalies, noticed dissonant details. Michael's shoes had traces of fresh cement dust, the same type used to anchor devices under cars. His watch, a $100,000 Patek Philippe, was 3 minutes fast, as if he'd recently been in a different time zone. And there was a smell, barely perceptible, cordite, the smell of someone who'd handled explosives. Sarah said nothing, but memorized every detail. Her analytical mind, dormant for 5 years, was awakening. Patterns emerged from chaos. Connections formed. The engineer who'd designed complex systems capable of processing thousands of variables per second was still there, under the janitor's skin. The following weeks transformed Sarah's life unexpectedly. From invisible janitor, she'd become the reluctant hero, the woman who'd saved New York's most powerful CEO. The media besieged her, but she refused every interview. James had insisted on a reward, a new job, anything. Sarah had asked only to keep her janitor position and one favor, to bring her daughter Lily to Manhattan for a weekend. The police had put James under protection, but he'd refused the standard safe house, opting for the fortified penthouse in Tribeca. He'd imposed one condition, though. Sarah had to be part of the security team. He no longer trusted the professionals who hadn't seen the device. He wanted the woman who had the instinct to recognize danger. The forced cohabitation revealed 2 people completely different from the masks they wore. James, without the CEO armor, was surprisingly vulnerable. He suffered from chronic insomnia, recurring nightmares where his father berated him for not being strong enough. He took anxiety medication secretly, drank too much whiskey at night, talked in his sleep, revealing fears he'd never admit while awake. Sarah discovered a brilliant but damaged man. William Sterling had raised him like a corporate soldier, programmed to win at any cost. No weaknesses, no emotions, only results. At 42, he had everything money could buy, but nothing the heart desired. No real friends, no love, no family beyond the brother he only saw at board meetings. During the long nights of surveillance, they began to talk, not as CEO and janitor, but as 2 survivors. James told of the impossible pressure of being the Sterling heir, how every success was never enough for his father's ghost. Sarah shared the weight of guilt, how every night she dreamed of Marcus in his wheelchair, asking her why. It was during one of these nights that Sarah noticed something strange in the company security cameras. Michael had an unusual pattern. Nighttime meetings in the underground garage, always with the same car, a black sedan with diplomatic plates. Sarah recognized the car. It belonged to the Chinese commercial embassy. She began digging with the computer skills she'd never really lost. What she found was disturbing. Michael had gambling debts of $8 million, covered by increasingly risky loans. Sinotech, Sterling Industries' main Chinese competitor, had offered him a way out, $50 million to facilitate a hostile takeover. With James dead, Michael would inherit control of the company. The confrontation took place in William Sterling's old office, a mahogany and leather sanctuary on the 40th floor of the tower. James had summoned Michael under the pretense of discussing business strategies. He entered unsuspecting, still playing the role of the caring brother, even bringing the pastries James had loved as a child. When James presented the evidence, the transformation was instant. The mask of the affectionate brother dissolved, revealing a face twisted by years of resentment. Michael exploded in a tirade of repressed hatred, accusing James of stealing everything: their father's love, the company, the future. He'd always been the second son, the backup plan, the less brilliant one. The situation quickly deteriorated. Michael pulled a Glock 19 from his jacket, hands shaking but determined. Sarah, who had anticipated this possibility, was already moving. Years of reflexes honed at Tesla's test tracks proved useful. A precise kick disarmed Michael, who collapsed crying like the spoiled child he'd never stopped being. But as the police took Michael away, Sarah felt something was off. The plan was too sophisticated for Michael, too well orchestrated. Someone else was pulling the strings, using the weak brother as a sacrificial pawn. She returned to the tower at night, using her janitor keys to access the paper archives in the basement. Documents no one had consulted in years, contracts from William Sterling's era. And there she found what she was looking for: a secret agreement from 2018 between Richard Vaughn and a consortium of investors. If the Sterling family lost control of the company, Vaughn would automatically become CEO with almost unlimited powers. But the most shocking discovery came when Sarah hacked Vaughn's old computer, the one he used for personal projects. Inside were files that told a different story of the Fremont incident. Encrypted emails showed that Vaughn had deliberately supplied the defective chips to Tesla, knowing about the problem. He'd shorted Tesla stock the day before the test, making $70 million when the stock crashed after the accident. The emergency board meeting was called at dawn. Vaughn arrived confident, already savoring victory with Michael in prison, and James emotionally destroyed. He didn't expect to find Sarah at the table, nor the projection of evidence of his 20-year conspiracy. Vaughn's fall was spectacular. He tried to flee, but the guards stopped him. As he was dragged away, he shouted his twisted justification. The world was unfair. Mediocre people like him had to fight, while the incompetent were born rich. He'd just leveled the playing field. With the traitors eliminated, James found himself having to rebuild not just the company, but himself. He offered Sarah the position of CTO, but she refused. She didn't want to return to that world of impossible pressures. James then proposed something different: a partnership to create a division dedicated to ethical safety, responsible innovation that put human lives before profits. It was Lily, Sarah's 11-year-old daughter, who convinced her. James had tracked her down and brought her to Manhattan. The reunion between mother and daughter after months of weekend-only visits was touching. Lily simply said her mother was a hero who just needed time to heal, and now that time had come. The new division was born with Sarah as director. The first product was an anomaly detection system for vehicles that would prevent thousands of accidents. Ironically, Tesla was the first customer, closing a circle that began with a tragedy. 2 years later, the Plaza Hotel hosted the most unlikely wedding of the year. The janitor was marrying the CEO, a modern fairy tale the media loved, but which for Sarah and James represented much more. It was mutual redemption, mutual salvation, love born from the ashes of pain. Lily, now 13, was maid of honor, radiant at seeing her mother finally happy. Marcus Thompson, the paralyzed driver, brought the rings in his motorized wheelchair, living symbol that from the worst evil can come good. He'd publicly forgiven Sarah, saying the accident had led him to discover his true calling, directing a foundation for injured athletes. During the reception, James took the microphone. The Iceman was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that true strength lies in vulnerability. He told how a desperate scream had saved him not only from physical death, but emotional death. Sarah had taught him that a person's value isn't in their bank account, but in the courage to do the right thing even when it costs everything. Sarah spoke little, as was her style, but her words were powerful. By saving James, she'd saved herself. He'd given her back her daughter, a purpose, dignity. But most of all, he'd taught her that falling isn't the end if someone extends a hand to lift you up. The most touching moment came when Michael, on special leave from prison, where he was serving a reduced sentence for cooperation, approached. 2 years of prison had transformed him. He knelt before James asking for forgiveness, and James embraced him. Forgiveness freed both from the weight of the past. Sterling Industries became a Harvard Business School case study, how a tragedy transformed into rebirth. Revenue doubled, 0 accidents in safety products, voted best company to work for 2 consecutive years. But the real success was personal. 2 broken souls who'd mended together. The last image of the wedding captured everything. Sarah in a wedding dress, but wearing comfortable flats. James in a tuxedo, but with a janitor's pin on his lapel. Lily playing piano. Marcus dancing in his wheelchair. Michael serving as witness to the power of forgiveness. The Mitchell Sterling Foundation for Industrial Safety, born a year later, would save thousands of lives. But it all started with a scream, an instinct, a woman who had the courage to run toward danger. Because in the end, as Sarah had learned, we're not defined by our failures, but by what we do after. And James had discovered that true power isn't in commanding, but serving. Not in climbing ever higher, but knowing when to extend a hand to someone who's fallen. The Janitor and the CEO. An impossible story made inevitable. Proof that sometimes you just need to scream, "Don't get in that car," to save not 1 but 2 lives, to transform destiny, to find love in the most unlikely places. Like an underground garage where a woman in work clothes saves a man in a Tom Ford suit, and in doing so, both save themselves. Hit like if you believe a moment of courage can change destinies. Comment with the moment that touched you most. Share with someone who needs to know that a person's value isn't in their title, but in their heart. Subscribe for more stories that show how the instinct to save can transform lives.